Hello, everyone, and welcome to our session today, Putting Market Channel Selection into Practice. We are so excited you're here, and we have Hannah, who I'll bring in just in a moment. I just wanted to welcome everyone, encourage you all to use the chat feature to introduce yourself, ask questions throughout the presentation. You'll also notice a polling section, so please feel free to fill out the polls so we can get to know you all and the audience. And lastly, there's also a rating section underneath the video. You should see an opportunity to rate, and you can leave anonymous ratings, and that would really help us as we work on future conferences. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Hannah into the screen. Hannah, welcome, Hannah.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right. Oh, yeah, we're super happy to have you. All right, well, I'm going to get myself off the screen and hand it over to you.
All right, thanks. All right, hey everybody. My name is Hannah Dankbar. I'm the local food program manager with NC State Extension. Today we're going to be going over how to select market channels, how to get started, some special considerations. A lot of the talk is focusing on how to make a market channel fit in just not your business, but also your lifestyle. So that's a big thing that I'm hoping you'll walk away with. I will, just a little asterisk on this presentation. Usually what I do for this type of presentation is actually a series of worksheets that you walk through and fill in specific information about yourself and your farm. This is my first time doing it in this webinar type format. So I am considering this sort of a pilot presentation, so hang with me here. I do hope you enjoy it. And with that, I'm going to, start my slides. I think I need to move that out of the way. All right, I think y'all see my title slide. So yes, just jumping right in. Once I get PowerPoint to work. There we go. All right, so we're gonna go through three main things today. We're going to look at some drivers beyond profit. As I said, we're going to try to get you thinking about how you can make your marketing plan work not just for your business, but also your lifestyle. Then we're going to walk through just an overview of market channels with some considerations for the criteria that I'll bring up. And then we'll wrap up with some other marketing considerations. And my plan is to stop for questions between each of these three sections. Let's see, it looks like I lost having the chat up on my screen, so I'll try to check in every now and then to see if there's anything there. I will also add one thing that I really miss about in-person presentations and conferences is just getting to hear about farms and everything that you're up to, what you're dreaming of, the excitement that you have for your work. So I'd love to see some of that in the chat as we go as well, and that's mostly for my benefit and interest. All right, so thinking about drivers beyond profit. Obviously, profit is a very big motivation for a business, and I definitely encourage you to keep that up at the top of your list. But I have a hunch that if we were sitting in a room and I asked all of you why you got into farming, very few of you would say, or if anybody would say, doing it, you got into farming to make money. There are lots of other things involved, and that's why we need to account for your personality and lifestyle in developing your farm business. So some drivers beyond profit that you can use when considering market channels are lifestyle preferences. This includes your personality, what's important to you, what your values are, what skills you have, what skills you want to develop, just you as a person and what you bring to your business. Then there's some of the logistics and cost, thinking about how often do you want to be driving, what other things do you have to pay for to enter a market channel, some things like that. We'll go into more details about that. You obviously need to consider the type of risk involved with each market channel. It's no use being engaged with the market if you're up at night worrying about it every week. Obviously, there's going to be stress at times, but it shouldn't be a constant thing that wears you down. Throughout this talk, I'll bring up some things that we see in the research about different levels of labor needs, and we'll also touch on how much volume you can move within specific market channels. So as I mentioned, when I usually do this type of presentation, I have a series of worksheets, and the first one is just all about you and your farm business. So I do want to take a minute and just hopefully bring some of these thoughts up to the top of your mind. So I'm just going to read these off and sort of think about what applies to you, and keep that in mind as we go throughout this talk. So the first one is just, what's your personality? Are you introverted or extroverted? The example I always give is that I'm a pretty extreme introvert, and the thought of selling at a farmer's market every single Saturday, talking to lots of different people, stresses me out. Even just saying it stresses me out a little bit. But the thought of selling to like a restaurant and getting to know one chef really well seems very manageable for me. So that's why that part's important. Then the next one is just, can you ballpark how much you are producing each year? Do you know exactly how much you need to move? That can help guide some decisions too. And also, how much labor do you currently have? Are you interested, and can you handle adding any more workers? Again, we'll touch on some findings about labor later on. And then also think about, what skills do you have? Are you really good at spreadsheets? Are you pretty savvy about navigating different types of contracts? Are you really good at marketing? Are you a really good salesperson? Are you really good at designing things? Do you like doing social media and selling stuff online? How do you like to spend your time? What are you good at? And also, what are you interested in learning? And then the last one is, what's important to you? Do you value contributing to your community and building those relationships? Are you passionate about addressing food security in your community? Do you value hard work? Are you pretty risk adverse? Different considerations like that. So hopefully some things just about you and your business are coming to mind to help set us up for the rest of this talk. I also want you to think about, what are your boundaries? Are there things that you are really not interested in doing? Because that can help narrow down your options and create some more realistic opportunities. So one thing is to consider is, if you're going to do deliveries, how far are you willing to drive? I can admit that COVID has turned me into a bit of a homebody. So when somebody brings up driving more than 100 miles, I'm like, do we really have to? Which sometimes, yes, you do. But do you want to do that each week? Also, how many days per week do you want to spend on the road? Because that takes time away from being on your farm. So is there a limit that you want to put on that? And then, is there also a dollar amount that you can assign to this? Is there a certain amount of money that just doesn't make the effort worth it to you? There's no right or wrong answers with any of these. It's very much what you're comfortable with. And it may take some experimentation to actually find answers to some of these questions. So don't feel like you need to have concrete answers right now. And before we jump into specific market channels, I also, while we're in this brainstorming phase, I wanted to get you thinking about where markets are in your communities. And I'm still not sure where all of you are from, so this is very big picture. But if you're looking for new markets, think about where people go to eat, find ingredients to cook, be entertained, maybe even where they go to exercise to work off that food. I know I've seen some advertisements for CSAs right outside of gym doors, which I think is a pretty brilliant move. So be creative. Also, one piece of advice that I have is, go check these places out and see if you're actually interested in being there or doing deliveries there or something like that. So just the last big picture things to remember before we really dive in is that a pretty common piece of advice that I give is that it is important to diversify your market channels to make your business more resilient. We all saw during COVID how markets shut down overnight. And who's to say something like that, hopefully not this bad, but something could happen where a business shuts down or a grocery won't pick up your product or something like that. So selling through multiple channels is a good idea. And I'll touch on a few where like, oh, this might be good to blend with this, some things like that. And also something that I touched on a little bit is that it may take a while to find the perfect blend of market channels for you. And what we encourage people to do is track some data and information to help you find that perfect blend. So obviously tracking sales, amount of products sold is really important, but also track if like how much you are enjoying it. Are you really enjoying interacting with customers at a farmer's market, or have you developed a good relationship with a wholesaler that you're really proud of and want to continue? Making some notes like that can help you make really good decisions, and making notes as you go can help give you something to look back and reflect on, to make some intentional data-driven decisions, which is always helpful. Let's see. So now we're going to jump into the overview of market channels. Let's see. And I'm just going to do a quick glance. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm just going to keep going. So we're going to jump into some direct-to-consumer channels. I'm going to walk through, I have like 4 or 5 of these, and then we'll look at some intermediary and wholesale market channels. Oops. All right, so some general considerations for direct-to-consumer market channels is that these are pretty easy entry points and have a lot of room to grow as your business grows. So if you're just getting started with farming, some of these market channels provide really good opportunities to build relationships with consumers, which could help, one, build your business and also give you some good information on how you can build your business moving forward. Asking them what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see more of in the future, and seeing how you can fill that need is fantastic information to have as you're doing some business planning. A lot of them have pretty low costs to get into, which we'll talk about. And as I mentioned, it's a good idea to sort of scope out what's around you. So if you are in North Carolina, the Visit NC Farms app in the NC 10% campaign can help you find either existing farmers markets or other farms near you that also sell direct to consumer. So the first market channel to go through is farmers markets. So these are really great entry points. In my vision of a perfect world, each community would have their own farmers markets where we can go meet our farmers, get some food, build community. They're really easy to get into, and thinking about how they fit into like your lifestyle preferences. They are something that you can just show up to. So if you have like a last minute family emergency or anything that just pops up, you can also just not show up to market. That means you won't sell your products that day, but there's also that's really the only drawback. There is a lot of customer interaction at these markets, so for the extroverts out there, this could be the best thing for you. It's also great for new farmers. This is where farmers who are not terribly far away from you and customers gather at one place and at one time. So you can find people to learn from and network with, and you can also meet people in the community who are interested in buying local food and start building those relationships. So I really like farmers market as that entry point, because then if you're interested in building a CSA or something, it gives you an entry point with consumers to start doing some of the marketing. So some of the logistics and costs associated with farmers markets, there are typically vendors fees, typically not outrageous. They really vary by like how long the market season is and how many times the market's open and how big it is. So it's definitely something to ask about. There's usually some sort of like vendor agreement too that goes along with farmers markets, just about like what time you'll set up, how often you'll show up, things like that. As far as for yourself, you're going to want to consider the travel time and days. Oftentimes for farmers markets, it does mean packing up on Friday nights and then driving pretty early Saturday mornings. There are midweek markets and they're offered at other times, so just consider how it fits into your schedule. And then there is some minimal equipment required. You're going to want a good tent and some good weights for that tent because they do blow away. You may also want some marketing materials just to like set out on the table. You may or may not need to bring your own table, just depending on the market. So just some minor things to consider there, but overall pretty easy to get into. There are some risks associated with farmers markets. The first being weather typically results in lower customer counts. You could go to a market and if there is a low customer count that day, you could be going home with unsold product, and then you have to have a plan for what to do with that. So that would be something to build into your plan as you get started. There's also some price pressure at farmers markets, which is hard to say. If everybody around you is selling kale for $3 a bunch, you might feel some pressure to not go above that. But you need to make sure that you're selling your food for a fair price and enough to justify your cost of production. So that's just something to keep in mind. So then moving on to labor needs, this is something you can really start off on your own. And then depending on the amount of product and the size of the market, it could be really beneficial to get some help as you grow. One thing that the literature shows about direct-to-consumer farms is that as the farm produces more, there's usually a need for higher scale labor. So instead of like minimal skills, just like doing some minimal tasks, you're probably going to be paying somebody decently well, which is great for rural economies, but definitely something to consider as you're thinking about how you're scaling up your business. And then for volume, really depends on the market base. There are some really big farmers markets, especially here in North Carolina. And then there are some in some of our smaller communities. There's usually not a minimum required to get into the market. There's usually just like a set amount of vendors each market could take. So it really is flexible for wherever you at in your business development. So then looking at CSAs, I think these are a fantastic way to step up from farmers markets. If you see a lot of success there, this may be an option you want to consider. As far as like lifestyle preferences, hopefully you're interested in marketing, because especially to start this, you're going to have to build a customer base if you're trying to sell all years out. And then you do get a lot of flexibility once that season starts as far as managing customer interactions with pickups. You can either set a table up somewhere and do that direct interaction, which could be helpful for gathering some information. Or I know some CSAs I've gotten in the past, they are dropped off at somebody's house under like a little rain protection setup. And I just pick it up and go home without talking to anybody. So totally up to you. A lot of the work would be done before the production season really starts. So then thinking about logistics and costs, there is the potential for some good profits, especially if you can sell all of your shares and move all your product. There's a little bit more of a cost with marketing and packaging materials. So this may be a good one to start small with and then figure out how to scale up as you move forward. Some of the risks to consider, there's just like normal production risk. As you do that off-season marketing work, you're going to be marketing that Instagram-worthy image of beautiful produce that comes in the summer. And then the reality is that there's going to be insects and diseases, everything that goes into farming. But your customers are buying into that risk. So that also helps cut down on that a little bit, which is great. Labor needs are sort of the same as farmers markets. If you start small, labor needs can be pretty minimal. but depending on how large you get, how many shares you have, and how many drop-offs you have, you may need some labor down the road. I know I've seen some farms that do drop-offs multiple days of the week. So how would you need to think about coordinating like harvesting and actually doing on-the-farm work with that delivery. So thinking about volume, it is a pretty easy way to move a lot of product. I mean, you harvest it, clean it, put it in a box, and it goes out the door. So that's really great. So I think CFSA is a great way to scale up. You can start with this if you really know where to find that customer base. So the next one on my list that I had is farm stands and farm stores. We have quite a few of these around North Carolina, which I really enjoy. Typically these are closer to the farm, so if you don't love spending a lot of time on the road, this could be a really good option. And depending how much time you spend at the store and if you're able to build like that customer base that keeps coming back, you could develop some really deep relationships, which could be really rewarding. Some of the logistics and costs with it, you will most likely need some sort of roadside sign and doing some marketing. It's not a type of store that people are just gonna start coming into. People have to become aware of it. Depending on how you're set up, there may be some infrastructure that really adds to your overhead. If you're doing a farm store that's inside the structure with cold storage that has a lot of electricity and just like physical building that's attached to it, that's going to really add to your costs and definitely something you need to consider. But if you're just sort of like pitching like a sort of small structures, just like a stand by the side of the road, then you don't have electricity. You just really have to keep it stocked and there's a lot less overhead. So scale really plays a piece in that. As far as how much you can charge, the prices really vary by the market and your location. Definitely pay attention to food prices around you and think about where you fit in within that market landscape. You definitely need to be competitive enough to draw people in, and whether that's having some type of value added product that people can't find and then you can set your own price, or some type of staple that brings people in as well. And again, this one requires a little less travel. If you decide to aggregate product from other farms, you'll have to coordinate that pickup or delivery and figure out what that looks like. But overall, ideally, you'd be pulling product from your farm and bringing it to either the stand or the store. And really, the customer count is the biggest risk associated with this. So again, thinking about like those marketing skills, where can you market, how can you draw people in, would be important for this market channel. Then thinking about the labor needs, you will most likely, depending on your hours, you're most likely going somebody to come in and just like manage the transactions within the stand or the store. If you're running a bigger store, you may need additional help with either on-farm production or aggregation of products. So if you're bringing stuff in from other farms, that also adds a delivery time and cost aspect, definitely to consider. And the volume, it really depends on the size of your farm stand. If you build a small stand, you're probably, and only have a few different products, it might be pretty small. If you're building a big farm store inside a structure, you might be able to move quite a bit of product. And then I just sort of lumped all the agritourism market channels together. If you are interested in developing an agritourism enterprise, Extension actually has an 8-part curriculum about how to do that with some business planning involved. And you walk out of that workshop with an agritourism enterprise fully developed. So I'm just going to touch on a few things here. If you are interested in learning more about that, we do have a curriculum that takes a much deeper dive. So Thinking about lifestyle preferences, there is quite a bit of customer interaction, and it's all on your farm. You're bringing people in who are excited to get out of their own community or neighborhood down the road or something and come see your farm and get to know about you and your enterprise. Just thinking about logistics and cost. Again, there are some marketing costs involved. Getting listed on the Visit and See Farms app is some free marketing, so definitely look for those free options out there. But you will have to do quite a bit of advertising and marketing. Some other costs may be equipment and packaging. For example, if you're doing like a U-pick strawberry field or something, you may need just like a stack of buckets that people can use in case they don't bring their own. And then thinking about risk, agritourism does present some unique risk. You're bringing people onto your farm, it's your property, and you don't always know what they're going to do. So thinking about what type of liability insurance you may need. And again, we have some resources about that. And then weather, again, presents a pretty big risk. What happens if it's just a really rainy spring and you miss the peak weekends to get people outside? And then also production risk. What happens if you have a big disease or something like run through your pumpkin patch or whatever it is? Thinking about your labor needs. At a minimum, you're going to want some staff to like process payments and just sort of keep an eye on things. But depending on what you're doing, your customers may require direct supervision. And then from the literature, we've seen that overall agritourism just moves like a medium level of product, which isn't totally descriptive, but it's not going to move as much as potentially as like a CSA would or something. Let's see. So that's what I had listed for direct-to-consumer channels. I'm going to try to see if I can find what's in the chat. Oops. Okay, it looks like we have a lot of direct-to-farmers here. Let's see, some good, localharvest.org. Yeah, that's a pretty good website. And I think that their fees for getting set up there are pretty minimal too. We do have an extension publication that lists different online marketplaces that I can find. We do have it posted on our local food extension website. So if you are looking at different types of online sales, there are quite a few platforms. And again, the research shows that customers are really enjoying buying stuff online. And especially since the pandemic has started, that's really included local foods. So that's definitely another option. And if you're very technology savvy, you can branch out to like marketing on Instagram and pulling people into your store that way as well. Let's see. Since we have so many direct-to-consumer folks, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any. I guess I'm going to try my screen again. Okay. So now we're just going to run through some intermediary and wholesale options. And these selling through these market channels are very different than selling direct to consumers. So that's definitely something to consider as you look into these options. That being said, they can be very useful for making your business more resilient, and they are critically important for having a thriving local food economy like what I would like to see across our region. So some of the considerations for these types of market channels is that you at least at the very minimum need to be aware of the USDA grading standards. You need to know just like what the requirements are, how to follow them. That's really important in the wholesale markets. These types of markets also require a more consistent volume and supply, so they're good channels to also just to work up to, especially if you're new to farming and production generally. As you get into some of these markets, some food safety considerations kick in. There's GAP, which is Good Agricultural Practices, I think is the P, certification, and or FSMA, which is a food safety regulation may apply. So if there's somebody specific that you're interested in working with, you'll definitely want to ask what they require. And I think FSMA kicks in once you hit a certain dollar amount of sales. So as you do some business planning, you're definitely going to want to look into both of those and see what types of impacts they would have, because there may be some associated costs with like getting a new sink or cold storage or something like that. Often there's also some types of contracts involved, so if that's really intimidating, you may want to find somebody who can help you with that. Or if you're really savvy with contracts, maybe these will be great options for you. The other thing is that instead of communicating directly with your consumers, you're going to do most of your communication through packaging and labeling. And there are some really great regional and state branding labels that can help with that, that customers recognize. And there may also be some certifications that you'd be interested in getting just to help communicate your own production values with your consumers. There's often more record keeping required, usually for traceability reasons. If there is some sort of outbreak or something, being able to find what's causing the issues is important. There may be some other details involved with these. It really, with these channels, it sort of depends on who you decide to sell through. So these are all things just to consider, and they cover all of the sellers that I'm about to touch on. So the first one is just a distributor. These can vary quite a bit. It can be something like a food hub, like we have Tractor in Western North Carolina, who's a food hub. We have about 16 food hubs across North Carolina, I think. And then we also have some companies such as Happy Dirt, guys quite a bit in North Carolina, and their warehouse is based in Durham. And there's some other ones too. Those are just some examples. So with these, you don't need to do as much marketing. You'll just work with maybe just even one company, maybe even just one person at one company. From the research, we've seen that this market channel does cause a little bit more stress. I don't know if that applies to working with some of like the food hubs and Happy Dirt, which do a little bit more to promote farmers and protect those businesses. So that might be something to consider if you're interested in going this route. Is there a local company or food hub that might be more willing to work with you? Some of the logistics and costs, it can be quick and easy. They'll let you know what they need, and if you have it, they may take it as long as it meets their standards. There may be some required packaging. I was talking to one of our extension agents a couple weeks ago, and she was telling me about a farmer who worked with a distributor, and they were going to sell them heirloom tomatoes. So the farmer planted 2 varieties. Well, the distributor wanted them packaged with 4 varieties, which he just didn't have. So that ended up not working out, and he had to find something else. So really, again, it goes back to like those details that are involved in knowing what they're looking for and what you can provide up front. And again, some of the food safety requirements, which there are some opportunities to help cover the cost as you get started with those. If you go first, like the GAP certification, but thinking it's definitely some cost for equipment and record keeping to account for. Some of the risk, there's buyer backout. You could pull up to their dock and they realize that your product isn't quite what they were looking for, and then you go home with your product. That can definitely happen. And then their needs may or may not be consistent. A lot of like grocery stores try to keep like a steady supply of produce throughout the year, but is there need for like watermelons during peak watermelon season? Are they going to need the same amount from you? The labor needs may be pretty low once you figure out like your good agricultural practices and everything. So that's one plus. And then if this does work, you can move quite a bit of product very quickly, so which is also another plus to consider. Then thinking about local institutions, this farm to institution supply chain is definitely an area to do a lot of work in. It can be really rewarding. It is a way to get local food into your institutions and to potentially new consumers and make them more aware of local food. So it can be very rewarding. You do need a commitment from the institution. It usually requires finding like that key gatekeeper to get you into the institution. And it can be a pretty deep relationship. So finding that one person who you're in like constant communication with and being able to work with is beneficial. Some of the logistics, again, food safety, equipment, and time is going to apply. There's some pretty detailed record keeping that's needed, and then coordinating the delivery to the institution, which ideally isn't too far away from you. And then thinking about the risk is again the buyer back out if it doesn't meet their standards or anything like that. And also their commitment. If there's a staff turnover and your gatekeeper moves on to another job, is that institution going to stay committed to buying from you? Institutions, especially public institutions, can usually be sort of tricky to get contracts with. I say this as a state employee. Many have like requirements or need multiple people to vet contracts and things. So it can move a little bit slower too than selling to like a private business or something like that. Again, the labor needs can be pretty low. And really depending on the institution, you may not be selling a lot of product. If you're selling to like one school or one child care center, or if it's a larger institution like a hospital, you may be able to sell a little bit more. It might depend on what they need though. So this is something to consider and could be a little bit harder to get up and off the ground, but could be really rewarding if it may align with your values of getting local food into your community really well. So thinking about groceries next can be a little bit stressful. They can be a little bit picky about what they're looking for. It can also be really quick and easy. If they have a spot on their shelf, they may be interested in even driving out to your farm and picking up something. Thinking about the logistics, washing, drying, and storage equipment would be really important. That cold chain is really important for all of these market channels. And then meeting the packing standards. So there may even be some like PLU and SLU requirements to think about for how to sell at a grocery. Some of the risk involved are again that buyer back out. You could meet up to exchange the product, and it could not meet their standards, or they may have too much and turn you away, or something like that. And they may also change their orders. I think grocery stores usually typically over order. And I know we're in a weird time with supply chains, so it could be an issue or it could not be, depending on where you are and where we are with the world. Labor needs, again, are a little bit lower. And you can sell quite a bit of product. It really depends on the size of the grocery that you're selling to. So then thinking about restaurants, I love seeing local food in restaurants. And if you're thinking about like farm to table restaurants, they would also be interested potentially in doing some marketing for your business. Like walking into farm to table restaurants, I enjoy seeing all the farms listed out on a board or something. And you can be in contact with the chef. They may be interested, they're usually interested in very fresh local produce to help them develop recipes. So then you can pitch new stuff to them. It's this really good two-way street is what I hear about most of the time. And again, it's that deeper relationship, which personally is what I find rewarding. And you'll just have to decide if that's what you want. Thinking about logistics and cost. think about the delivery time and the money. Sometimes restaurants have set payment schedules that could be a little bit behind when you actually deliver the product, and you would have to fill that in with your other business planning. They would want the product cleaned up and ready to use, so thinking about having it washed, dried, and stored correctly. And then it can take some communication work, communicating with the chef at the restaurant about what they're planning and can you meet that need, and having a little bit back and forth. And also having a product that is appealing both to the chef and potentially to the consumer, so that it's something that they can just pick up and market right away. Again, there's the buyer back out risk and the payment schedule that I mentioned. Thinking about labor needs, if you're delivering to one restaurant, it's probably pretty low, and especially if you incorporate it with other deliveries and drop-offs. If this is something you do quite a bit of, you may need some labor to help with delivery and maybe even marketing and figuring out payments and everything. Volume, again, depends on what type of restaurant you're selling to. If it's a small restaurant, it's probably going to be a little bit smaller volume. But the prices are a little bit higher than some of the channels that we've been talking about through this section. Let's see, that is it for the wholesale and intermediary. So I'm going to jump down to the chat. Sorry, I see a question about PLU and SLU. They are the labels that get scanned at grocery stores. So they're usually required to be put on the product. We do have an extension publication about that. That could be helpful. It's not too heavy of a lift, but it is something else to learn about if you are interested in selling through that channel. And I also see the What's Good app, which is something I'm actually not familiar with. Let's see, it looks like a monthly subscription that takes 10% of sales, plus it's market-based. So you just deliver to the location, the customer picks it up. So that might be a really easy way to do like direct-to-consumer sales. Yeah, it is something I'm not familiar with, so I don't have a lot of thoughts to say, but it could be something to try. Are there any other questions? Let's see. Okay. That is all that I ended up with. Okay. So I actually just have a few more considerations. Those were all of the market channels that I had, and I know that those were like pretty broad strokes of considerations, and that it was a pretty quick overview. But hopefully, I was sort of hoping that between like part one, getting you to think about your preferences and your farm business and your own goals, and then that general overview, you could hopefully connect some dots and maybe come up with either some new ideas, or hopefully some of those market channels seemed a little less intimidating. So I just wanted to wrap up with some other marketing considerations. So really we talked about where, a little bit of how to sell your product. There are some other things. I mean, marketing local food is a pretty big topic, so I wanted to bring up some other things. No matter where you sell, customer recognition is going to be a really big element. So thinking about your branding is really important. And whether you're incorporating some of the like regional local food labels that I talked about, like here in North Carolina, we have the Got to Be NC. Out of Western North Carolina, there's the Appalachian Grown label. There's quite a few labels across the state. There's at least a handful that you can. You have to work with an organization, but they're usually pretty easy to get. You put it on your product, people instantly know, at least regionally, where it was produced. So that might be an instant connection. And that can be helpful either in direct to consumer or through the intermediary market channels. Another thing to think about is customer service. How are you going to gather that feedback? If you're interacting directly with your customers through a direct-to-consumer channel, what type of questions are you going to pose from time to time to make sure that you're meeting their needs? Once you get some customers on board, they're pretty easy. They tend to stick with you, but you definitely want to make sure that you are meeting their wants and needs and filling the spot in the local food marketplace. So some options for that need to be maybe like an end of season survey through your CFSA. Even just some conversations at a farmer's market could be useful. And then if you're selling through an intermediary, really the company is really important. So having open lines of communication, knowing who to contact at the company, just so if you do have questions or are interested in making any changes, you have somebody to contact and have those good conversations with. Another thing that we didn't even jump into today that I would encourage you to do some research on is value-added products. As you ramp up your business, and let's say you establish a really solid customer base, value-added products may help you boost your bottom line. What I mean by value-added is processing your product in any way. So whether you're freezing berries or making cheese or salsa or jams or pickles or hot sauce is one of my personal favorites, that you can charge a little bit higher of a price for, and it may like help with customer retention, just helps your business grow a little bit. There is a little bit of a process for getting that started. You're really going to want to hone in on your specific recipe to make sure that you can keep producing it in a standardized way, and you know exactly how much of each product you need to produce that final product. You may also need to find something like a community kitchen or something with some infrastructure that can help you do that processing, unless you are interested in adding that to your farm. But just so you know, there are several community kitchens across the state where you can go in and process your product. Depending on what you're making, you may have to talk to our folks over at NCDA or your state Department of Agriculture, and they'll help you get set up with specific labeling requirements, which really vary from whatever type of product you're trying to make. So starting over with a call to them pretty early is also a pretty good idea. And then you may want to consider other labels or certifications. If you're not making the sales pitch directly to your consumers, some of those labels and certifications can be really useful. Some examples of certifications are USDA organic, which I know can be a heavy lift to get. There's also the animal welfare approved. There's quite a few over there. Certifications are usually attached to standards, so you have to make sure that your production practices actually meet the standards so you can get that certification. But it may be useful. It may be a good way to officiate your values into your product. And it may also not be worth your time. It's definitely something to do some research on, decide if it's worth the effort or not. And then the last point that I want to make is continue to evaluate your market channels. Your business may grow over time. Your personal goals may change over time. So doing that check-in periodically with yourself to make sure that what you're doing is actually working for yourself and your farm business. And I am the biggest proponent of data-driven decisions. So again, tracking that information so you can go back and look at it to make that evaluation is, yes, big recommendation. Please take that away from this presentation. And also, if this is something that you're interested in getting a little bit more help with, a lot of what I have learned is through conversations with other farmers. Matt LaRue, who I think I mentioned at the beginning, I think he's presenting about niche meat here. He has a really great guide. It's about like 35 pages on how to evaluate market channels. He has this really great worksheet that you can fill out if you're a numbers person. That helps you actually rank some of these options. And then I also have to give the plug for NC Farm School. It's an 8-week curriculum through NC State Extension where you get to visit farms and you walk out with a pretty detailed business plan. So I'm ready to jump to questions now. Looks like we're going to wrap up a little bit early. Let's see. I'm going to stop screen share. Pull this back up. Let's see. I see confirmation about the relationship building with chefs and risk of losing the contract if a new chef arrives. Yeah, that's a good point. Anytime there's staff turnover, you'll have to hopefully not start from square one, but at least go back to building that relationship. Relationship building is really important with any of the market channels that I described. Just with how many people you'll be interacting with varies from type to type. Oh wow, somebody was able to sell a whole animal at a time. That's really useful. Further information on labeling. We do have a page with the North Carolina local food, like regional labels on our extension local food website. I think you can if you go to the extension NC State Extension webpage, you can navigate to the local food portal, and we do have a whole page about labeling. I'm actually not sure. Oh, we do have an extension publication about the SLU and PLU about how to get that set up. It's pretty big picture, but if you're just getting started, hopefully that's helpful. And again, if you go to the extension website and just type these things into the search bar that's at the top right, they should pop up. And my email is also pretty plastered all over the low food extension webpage, and I'd be happy to take any questions. And I see a link to a hot sauce recipe, which I'm definitely going to take a look at. I'm loving this time of year. I have a lot of hot sauce in my kitchen right now, which I think is fantastic. Let's see. I think those are all the comments. Was there anything else for our last few minutes?
Any other questions for Hannah before we wrap up? All right. Well, Hannah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who attended our session. The recording will be posted back here in the app, and I just encourage you to rate this session below. Oh, Scotty, any links to some of the resources? Do you have any links, Hannah, or would you recommend that folks reach out to you via email?
I can pull. I'll drop something in the chat really quick.
Sure.
Sorry. All right. This is. Oh, how do I post to the chat again?
I can post it for you, or actually, Scotty actually left his email right there for you if you want to just email him directly.
Oh, okay. Here is one page from our website. We have over. I can send it to Rachel. Hopefully, she can post it.
Yep, I can get it over there.
Okay, thanks. We have over 100 pages of information on our website, which is a little overwhelming. It is for me too. But we actually just redid we're finishing up our supply chain section of the website, which is where a lot of our marketing development pages are. So hopefully I put one of the pages into our market development. So hopefully you can click through that and find some new information. And if anybody is interested, my email's right at the bottom of that page. Or I can copy and paste some emails from the chat and follow up with folks.
Yeah, and you can also reach out to Hannah in this conference app as well and send her a message. So that's another way to get in contact.
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
I'll take questions and finding out about new things myself. So please reach out if you're interested.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you again, Hannah, for your time.
Yeah, thanks.